6 months of refusing unpaid overtime had apparently made me the most difficult person in the department. At least that's what Professor Henderson told me during what he called a performance review, but felt more like a tribunal. I sat across from his mahogany desk, watching him tap his Mont Blanc pen against a manila folder that contained 6 months of my supposedly problematic behavior. The irony wasn't lost on me that he was conducting this meeting during what should have been my lunch break. Henderson had been department chair for 3 years, long enough to develop what he considered a sophisticated understanding of academic politics, but not quite long enough to recognize when he was about to make a career-defining mistake. I'd been watching him make smaller versions of the same error for months, each one building toward this moment. The pattern was predictable if you knew what to look for. When the university announced budget cuts in January, Henderson had called it an opportunity for the department to demonstrate its commitment to fiscal responsibility. What he meant, of course, was that faculty would need to absorb additional responsibilities without additional compensation. The logic was simple from his perspective. We were all salaried employees, and salary meant availability whenever the department needed us. The fact that our contracts specifically outlined standard work hours seemed to have escaped his attention entirely. I had been an associate professor in the computer science department for 8 years. My research focused on distributed systems architecture, which meant I spent my days thinking about how to make complex technological networks function efficiently under stress. The skills transferred surprisingly well to academic administration, though I'd never particularly wanted to apply them in that context. Before Henderson arrived, I had served on every major departmental committee, supervised the graduate student orientation program, and managed our industry partnership initiatives. My performance evaluations had been consistently excellent, my teaching ratings among the highest in the department, and my research brought in steady funding. None of that seemed to matter anymore. The first request had come in February. Henderson needed someone to coordinate the department's response to the university's new student retention initiative. The previous coordinator had left for a position at another institution, and the administration wanted a comprehensive report within 6 weeks. The work would involve analyzing 5 years of enrollment data, conducting focus groups with current students, and developing a strategic plan for improving retention rates. Henderson estimated it would require about 10 hours per week of additional work. I had reviewed the project parameters carefully. The work fell well outside my normal teaching and research responsibilities, would require skills I possessed but had never been formally compensated for using, and would consume weekends and evenings for the entire 6-week period. When I asked about additional compensation or course release time, Henderson had looked genuinely puzzled. He seemed to view my question as a fundamental misunderstanding of what academic service meant. I declined the assignment. Henderson's reaction had been immediate and telling. He spoke about departmental citizenship, about the importance of supporting our students, about the challenging budget environment we all faced. He mentioned that other faculty members had been taking on additional responsibilities without complaint. He suggested that my refusal might reflect a concerning shift in my commitment to the department's mission. I listened to his entire response without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When he finished, I thanked him for his time and reiterated that I would be happy to take on the project if the department could provide appropriate compensation or adjust my other responsibilities accordingly. Otherwise, I would need to focus on my existing contractual obligations. The meeting ended with what Henderson called a mutual understanding, but felt more like a declaration of war. March brought 2 more requests. The first involved managing our participation in a university-wide diversity initiative that would require extensive evening and weekend work. The second was a request to serve as interim director of our industry outreach program after the previous director took a medical leave. Both positions had previously been compensated with either course releases or administrative stipends. Both requests came with apologetic explanations about budget constraints and hopeful suggestions that the additional work might be viewed as an investment in my future career development. I declined both assignments using the same criteria I had established in February. I was willing to take on additional responsibilities if they came with appropriate compensation or adjustments to my existing workload. Otherwise, I would continue to fulfill my current obligations at the highest possible level. Henderson's responses grew more pointed with each refusal. He began scheduling our conversations for late Friday afternoons, requiring me to stay after my normal departure time. He started copying the dean on emails about department service obligations. He made observations about faculty members who understood the importance of flexibility during challenging times. I documented everything. April marked the beginning of what Henderson would later call my difficult period. The characterization was interesting because my actual performance hadn't changed at all. My teaching evaluations remained strong. My research productivity continued at its usual pace, and I met every deadline and obligation specified in my contract. What had changed was my willingness to volunteer for additional unpaid work, and apparently that single factor was sufficient to transform me from a valued colleague into a problem employee. The department's other faculty members began to notice the shift. Some expressed private sympathy for my position, while acknowledging they couldn't afford to take similar stands. Others seemed genuinely convinced that my refusal to work unpaid overtime represented a troubling decline in collegial spirit. A few appeared to relish the opportunity to position themselves as more committed to the department's mission. Dr. Sarah Chen, a junior faculty member who had joined the department the previous year, proved to be an unexpected ally. She had been assigned to coordinate the student retention initiative after I declined, and she approached me in early April with questions about project management and data analysis. During our conversation, she mentioned that the work was consuming nearly 20 hours per week, far more than Henderson had initially estimated. She also noted that the university's budget documents showed allocated funds for temporary administrative support that had apparently been redirected to other priorities. I shared what I had learned about similar projects at other institutions, including typical compensation structures and workload expectations. Dr. Chen proved to be an excellent researcher, and within a week she had compiled a comprehensive analysis of how other universities handled comparable initiatives. Her findings suggested that our department's approach was not just unusual, but potentially problematic from both legal and accreditation perspectives. May brought the performance review that Henderson had been threatening since March. He had spent considerable time preparing for our meeting, developing what he clearly considered a compelling case for my attitude adjustment. His argument rested on three main points. My refusal to take on additional service obligations demonstrated a lack of commitment to departmental goals. My insistence on contractual boundaries showed insufficient flexibility for academic life, and my questions about compensation revealed a troubling mercenary mindset. I had prepared for this conversation as well, though my preparation had taken a different form. I had reviewed my contract carefully, consulted with the faculty union representative, and researched university policies regarding work assignments and compensation. I had also spent time documenting my actual productivity and contributions over the past 8 years, creating a comprehensive record of my value to the department. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. Henderson presented his concerns with the gravity of someone delivering a medical diagnosis. He spoke about the importance of collegiality, the traditions of academic service, and the need for all faculty members to contribute to the department's success. He mentioned specific examples of additional work that I had refused, framing each refusal as evidence of my declining commitment. When he finished, I thanked him for his feedback and presented my own analysis of the situation. I outlined my contractual obligations and demonstrated that my performance in all specified areas had been consistently excellent. I presented data showing that my research productivity and teaching effectiveness had actually improved over the past year. I provided documentation of my service contributions over the previous 8 years, including several major initiatives that had significantly benefited the department. Then I addressed the core issue directly. I explained that my refusal to take on additional unpaid work reflected not a lack of commitment, but a recognition that sustainable service required appropriate boundaries. I noted that the university's own policies supported faculty members who raised questions about workload equity and compensation. I mentioned that other institutions had found ways to manage similar budget challenges without requiring extensive unpaid overtime from faculty. Henderson listened to my presentation with visible impatience. When I finished, he reminded me that academic life required flexibility and suggested that my rigid adherence to contractual boundaries might indicate that I was no longer a good fit for the department's culture. He characterized my concerns about compensation as inappropriate for someone in my position. He concluded by noting that he would be watching my performance closely over the coming months. I thanked him again and returned to my office to continue my research. June brought an unexpected development. The university announced that our department would be receiving a substantial grant to establish a new center for applied computing research. The grant included funding for a director position, significant administrative support, and resources for collaborative projects with industry partners. The announcement generated considerable excitement throughout the department, particularly among faculty members whose research aligned with the center's focus areas. Henderson scheduled a series of meetings to discuss the center's development and identify potential candidates for the director position. The role would require someone with strong research credentials, experience managing complex projects, and demonstrated ability to work effectively with both academic and industry partners. The position came with a significant salary increase, course release time, and substantial administrative support. I had been watching the grant opportunity develop for nearly a year. My research background made me a natural candidate for the director position, and my previous experience managing industry partnerships provided relevant administrative experience. More importantly, I had been quietly preparing for this opportunity since Henderson's first request for unpaid overtime in February. While spending my evenings and weekends not working on unpaid departmental service, I had been cultivating relationships with potential industry partners, developing research proposals that aligned with the grant's objectives, and building collaborative networks with faculty at other institutions. I had also been documenting my project management experience and developing a comprehensive vision for how the center might operate. The application process proved to be thorough and competitive. Candidates were required to submit detailed research proposals, demonstrate their ability to manage complex initiatives, and present their vision for the center's development to a university-wide committee. The evaluation criteria emphasized innovation, leadership potential, and the ability to work effectively with diverse stakeholders. I submitted my application in early June, along with supporting materials that demonstrated my qualifications for the position. My research proposal outlined an ambitious but realistic plan for developing collaborative relationships with industry partners, creating innovative educational programs, and establishing the center as a leader in applied computing research. My project management portfolio included detailed documentation of my previous administrative experience, along with evidence of my ability to deliver results on time and within budget. The presentation to the evaluation committee took place in late June. I had prepared extensively for this opportunity, developing a comprehensive overview of my vision for the center and anticipating questions about my leadership approach. The committee included faculty members from across the university, along with representatives from the administration and external partners. During the presentation, I outlined my understanding of the center's mission and explained how my background had prepared me to lead its development. I discussed my research experience, my industry connections, and my approach to managing complex collaborative projects. I also addressed questions about my leadership style, my vision for the center's growth, and my strategies for building sustainable partnerships. The committee's questions were thoughtful and challenging. They asked about my experience managing budgets, my approach to conflict resolution, and my strategies for maintaining productive relationships with diverse stakeholders. They were particularly interested in my understanding of the grant's requirements and my plans for meeting the funding agency's expectations. I answered each question directly and thoroughly, drawing on my actual experience rather than theoretical knowledge. I provided specific examples of challenges I had faced and overcome, documented results I had achieved, and concrete plans for addressing potential obstacles. I also demonstrated my understanding of the center's strategic importance to the university and my commitment to ensuring its success. July brought the announcement I had been expecting. The university selected me as the founding director of the new Center for Applied Computing Research. The appointment would begin in August, with substantial administrative support and resources for developing the center's initial programs. The position represented a significant advancement in my career, with increased compensation, reduced teaching obligations, and opportunities to shape the direction of an important new initiative. Henderson's reaction to the announcement was everything I had hoped it would be. He had apparently assumed that my refusal to work unpaid overtime indicated a lack of ambition or commitment to advancing within the university. The possibility that I might be selected for the director position had seemingly never occurred to him, despite my obvious qualifications and relevant experience. The morning after the announcement, Henderson requested a meeting to discuss my transition to the new role. He arrived at my office with a carefully composed expression that suggested he had spent considerable time preparing for this conversation. He congratulated me on the appointment and noted that he looked forward to working with the center in the future. I thanked him for his support and began outlining my timeline for transitioning out of my current responsibilities. We discussed the courses I would no longer be teaching, the committees I would need to leave, and the research projects I would be transferring to the center. The conversation was professional and cordial, with no reference to our previous disagreements about service obligations. As we concluded the meeting, Henderson made an observation that revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of what had occurred. He suggested that my willingness to take on the director position demonstrated that I had overcome my previous reluctance to accept additional responsibilities. He seemed to view my appointment as evidence that his concerns about my commitment had been unfounded. I chose not to correct his interpretation. Instead, I thanked him for his feedback over the past months and noted that I had learned valuable lessons about the importance of choosing opportunities carefully. I mentioned that the director position would allow me to apply my skills in ways that aligned with both my professional interests and the university's strategic objectives. Henderson nodded approvingly and wished me success in my new role. He left my office with what appeared to be genuine relief, apparently convinced that our previous conflicts had been resolved satisfactorily. I watched him walk down the hallway, already planning his next request for someone to take on additional unpaid work. The transition to my new position proceeded smoothly. The university provided substantial support for establishing the center, including funding for administrative staff, equipment, and initial research projects. My previous experience managing complex initiatives proved invaluable as I worked to develop the center's programs and build relationships with industry partners. Dr. Chen proved to be an excellent addition to the center's team. Her work on the Student Retention Initiative had demonstrated her ability to manage complex projects and work effectively with diverse stakeholders. When I offered her a research position within the center, she accepted immediately. Her relief at leaving her unpaid administrative responsibilities was evident and understandable. The center's first year exceeded all expectations. We established partnerships with 6 major technology companies, launched 3 collaborative research projects, and developed innovative educational programs that attracted national attention. The funding agency praised our progress and indicated strong support for continued investment in our work. My relationship with Henderson stabilized into professional cordiality. He occasionally requested my input on departmental matters, and I provided assistance when my schedule permitted and the work aligned with my new responsibilities. He never again asked me to take on additional unpaid work, though whether this reflected lessons learned or simply recognition of my changed circumstances remained unclear. The broader implications of my experience became apparent over the following months. Other faculty members began asking questions about workload equity and compensation for additional responsibilities. The faculty union initiated discussions about appropriate boundaries for service obligations. The university administration developed new policies for managing budget constraints without requiring extensive unpaid overtime from faculty. None of these changes occurred overnight, and progress remained uneven across different departments. However, the conversation had shifted in meaningful ways. Faculty members felt more comfortable questioning unreasonable service demands. Administrators began recognizing the importance of sustainable workload management. The university developed more systematic approaches to addressing budget challenges. Dr. Chen's research on service obligations revealed patterns that extended well beyond our department. Her analysis showed that requests for unpaid overtime had increased significantly across the university, with disproportionate impacts on junior faculty and faculty from underrepresented groups. Her findings contributed to broader discussions about equity and sustainability in academic workload management. The center's success also demonstrated the value of strategic career planning. My refusal to accept additional unpaid work had allowed me to focus on opportunities that aligned with my long-term professional goals. The time I didn't spend on administrative tasks had been invested in research, relationship building, and skill development that directly contributed to my qualification for the director position. Looking back, Henderson's characterization of me as difficult had been accurate in one important sense. I had indeed been difficult for someone who wanted to extract additional unpaid work from faculty members. I had refused to accept the premise that budget constraints justified indefinite increases in service obligations. I had insisted on maintaining boundaries that protected both my professional development and my personal well-being. The label had been intended as criticism, but it had actually identified a crucial professional skill. Being difficult in the right circumstances, with the right people, about the right issues, had proved to be an essential component of career advancement. The challenge had been learning to distinguish between productive difficulty and counterproductive conflict. Henderson's face during the announcement of my appointment had indeed been priceless. Not because of any visible distress or regret, but because of his obvious surprise at the outcome. He had fundamentally misunderstood what my refusal to work unpaid overtime represented. He had interpreted it as a decline in ambition rather than a strategic focus on opportunities that offered appropriate compensation and advancement potential. The experience taught me valuable lessons about the relationship between professional boundaries and career development. Accepting unlimited additional responsibilities had not advanced my career during my first 8 years in the department. Instead, it had established a pattern of exploitation that could have continued indefinitely. Learning to decline inappropriate requests had created space for opportunities that actually aligned with my professional goals. The university's budget challenges had not disappeared, but the department had found more sustainable approaches to managing them. Some responsibilities had been redistributed among faculty members who received appropriate compensation. Others had been eliminated entirely after careful analysis revealed they were not essential to the department's mission. A few had been redesigned to require less time and resources while maintaining their effectiveness. Henderson continued to serve as department chair, though his approach to service requests became more systematic and equitable. He developed clearer criteria for additional work assignments, established rotation schedules for major responsibilities, and began advocating more effectively with the administration for resources to support faculty obligations. Whether these changes reflected personal growth or administrative pressure remained unclear, but the impact was beneficial regardless of the motivation. The center's continued success validated my decision to focus on opportunities that offered appropriate compensation and advancement potential. We attracted additional funding, expanded our research programs, and established collaborations with universities around the world. The work was challenging and demanding, but it was also rewarding in ways that went beyond financial compensation. My relationship with my colleagues evolved as well. Some who had initially viewed my refusal to work unpaid overtime as selfish or uncommitted began to recognize the strategic wisdom of maintaining professional boundaries. Others continued to believe that unlimited service obligations were essential to academic life, though they rarely expressed these views directly. The broader conversation about workload equity continued to develop across the university. Faculty members shared strategies for managing service obligations effectively. Administrators received training on sustainable approaches to budget management. The university developed new policies that provided clearer guidance on appropriate expectations for faculty service. These changes occurred gradually and unevenly, with setbacks and resistance along the way. However, the overall trajectory was positive. Faculty members felt more empowered to question unreasonable demands. Administrators became more systematic in their approach to distributing additional responsibilities. The university developed better systems for supporting faculty members who were asked to take on substantial service obligations. Dr. Chen's career flourished within the center's environment. Her research on academic workload management gained national recognition and contributed to policy discussions at universities across the country. Her work demonstrated that sustainable service obligations were not only possible, but actually enhanced both faculty satisfaction and institutional effectiveness. The center's success also created opportunities for other faculty members who had been struggling with unsustainable service demands. We were able to provide research positions, collaborative opportunities, and professional development resources that helped them redirect their careers toward more rewarding paths. The ripple effects extended well beyond our immediate team. Henderson's evolution as an administrator proved to be more significant than I had initially expected. His experience with my refusal to work unpaid overtime had apparently prompted broader reflection on his leadership approach. He began advocating more effectively for faculty resources, developed more equitable approaches to service distribution, and demonstrated greater awareness of the relationship between sustainable workload management and departmental effectiveness. The university's recognition of the center's achievements also validated my approach to professional development. The focus on strategic opportunity selection, careful preparation, and sustainable workload management had proved to be more effective than simply accepting every additional responsibility that was offered. The lesson was applicable well beyond academic settings. Looking back now, Henderson's characterization of me as difficult had been both accurate and incomplete. I had indeed been difficult for someone who wanted to extract unlimited, unpaid work from faculty members. However, I had also been strategic, focused, and ultimately successful in advancing both my own career and the broader goals of the institution. The experience reinforced my understanding that professional success often requires the courage to decline opportunities that appear beneficial but actually represent obstacles to long-term advancement. Learning to distinguish between productive challenges and exploitative demands had been essential to my development as both a researcher and an administrator. The center's continued growth and success demonstrated that strategic career planning could benefit not only individual faculty members, but also the institutions they serve. My refusal to accept additional unpaid work had created space for opportunities that generated far greater value for the university than the administrative tasks I had declined. Henderson's face during the announcement of my appointment had been priceless because it reflected his recognition that his understanding of faculty motivation and career development had been fundamentally flawed. He had assumed that willingness to work unpaid overtime indicated commitment and ambition. The reality was more complex and ultimately more rewarding for everyone involved. The lesson extended beyond our specific situation to broader questions about workplace culture, professional development, and institutional effectiveness. Organizations that relied on unlimited unpaid overtime from their employees were not only exploiting those individuals, but also missing opportunities to develop more sustainable and productive approaches to achieving their goals. My experience as center director continued to validate the strategic wisdom of maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. The work was challenging and demanding, but it was also compensated fairly and offered genuine opportunities for advancement. The contrast with my previous experience of declining unpaid service obligations was stark and instructive. The university's support for the center's development demonstrated that institutions could find ways to achieve their objectives while treating faculty members fairly and sustainably. The key was recognizing that short-term cost savings achieved through unpaid overtime were often offset by long-term costs in terms of faculty satisfaction, productivity, and retention. Henderson's evolution as an administrator provided hope that individuals could learn from their mistakes and develop more effective leadership approaches. His initial reaction to my refusal to work unpaid overtime had been predictable, but ultimately counterproductive. His subsequent recognition of the need for more sustainable approaches to service obligations had benefited the entire department. The broader implications of my experience continued to resonate throughout the university and beyond. Faculty members at other institutions began sharing strategies for managing service obligations effectively. Administrators developed better systems for supporting faculty members who were asked to take on substantial additional responsibilities. The conversation about workload equity became more sophisticated and productive. Dr. Chen's research on academic service obligations provided empirical support for practices that many faculty members had developed intuitively. Her findings demonstrated that sustainable workload management was not only possible, but actually enhanced both individual and institutional effectiveness. The evidence base for reform continued to grow. The center's success also created opportunities to influence broader conversations about academic career development and institutional effectiveness. We hosted conferences, published research, and developed partnerships that extended our impact well beyond our immediate institutional context. The ripple effects continued to expand. Henderson's face during the announcement of my appointment had been priceless because it reflected his dawning recognition that his approach to faculty management had been both unfair and ultimately self-defeating. His assumption that my refusal to work unpaid overtime indicated a lack of ambition had been revealed as fundamentally mistaken. The experience reinforced my conviction that professional success required not only technical competence, but also the strategic wisdom to recognize and pursue opportunities that offered genuine advancement potential. Learning to decline inappropriate requests had been as important as developing the skills to excel in appropriate roles. The center's continued growth and impact demonstrated that strategic career planning could benefit not only individual faculty members, but also the broader academic community. My decision to focus on opportunities that offered appropriate compensation and advancement potential had ultimately generated far greater value than accepting unlimited unpaid service obligations. The lesson was applicable well beyond academic settings to any workplace where employees were asked to take on substantial additional responsibilities without appropriate compensation or recognition. The key was developing the courage to decline exploitative demands while remaining open to opportunities that offered genuine professional development. Henderson's evolution as an administrator provided a model for how individuals could learn from their mistakes and develop more effective leadership approaches. His initial reaction to my refusal to work unpaid overtime had been predictable, but ultimately counterproductive. His subsequent recognition of the need for more sustainable approaches had benefited everyone involved. The broader conversation about workload equity and professional development continued to evolve in positive directions. Faculty members felt more empowered to question unreasonable demands. Administrators developed better systems for supporting sustainable service obligations. Universities began recognizing that short-term cost savings achieved through unpaid overtime were often offset by long-term costs in terms of faculty satisfaction and institutional effectiveness. The center's success validated my belief that strategic career planning and appropriate professional boundaries were not only compatible with institutional success, but actually enhanced it. The work we accomplished through fair compensation and sustainable workload management far exceeded what could have been achieved through exploitation and overwork. Henderson's face during the announcement of my appointment had been priceless because it captured his realization that his understanding of faculty motivation and career development had been fundamentally flawed. The moment represented not just personal vindication, but also validation of principles that extended far beyond our specific situation. 6 months of refusing unpaid overtime had led to the most significant advancement of my career. The label of being difficult had proved to be an asset rather than a liability. The strategic focus on opportunities that offered appropriate compensation and advancement potential had generated benefits that extended well beyond my individual circumstances. The experience taught me that professional success often requires the courage to resist immediate pressures in favor of long-term strategic thinking. Henderson's characterization of me as difficult had been accurate but incomplete. I had been difficult for someone who wanted to extract unlimited unpaid work, but I had also been strategic, focused, and ultimately successful in advancing both my own career and the broader goals of the institution. The center's continued impact demonstrated that this approach could benefit not only individual faculty members, but also the universities they served. The conversation about workload equity and professional development continued to evolve in positive directions, with implications that extended well beyond our immediate context. Henderson's evolution as an administrator provided hope that institutions could learn from their mistakes and develop more sustainable approaches to achieving their objectives. His initial reaction to my refusal to work unpaid overtime had been predictable, but ultimately counterproductive. His subsequent recognition of the need for change had benefited the entire department. The broader lesson was that professional boundaries in strategic career planning were not selfish or uncommitted, but rather essential components of sustainable success. The challenge was learning to distinguish between productive opportunities and exploitative demands, developing the courage to decline inappropriate requests while remaining open to genuine advancement possibilities. My experience as center director continued to validate these principles. The work was challenging and rewarding, compensated fairly, and offered genuine opportunities for professional growth. The contrast with my previous experience of declining unpaid service obligations was stark and instructive. The university's support for the center's development demonstrated that institutions could find ways to achieve their objectives while treating faculty members fairly and sustainably. The key was recognizing that short-term cost savings achieved through unpaid overtime were often offset by long-term costs in terms of faculty satisfaction, productivity, and retention. Henderson's face during the announcement of my appointment had been priceless because it reflected his dawning recognition that his approach to faculty management had been both unfair and ultimately self-defeating. The moment represented personal vindication, but also validation of principles with much broader application. The experience reinforced my understanding that professional success required not only technical competence, but also the strategic wisdom to recognize and pursue opportunities that offer genuine advancement potential. Learning to decline inappropriate requests had been as important as developing the skills to excel in appropriate roles. 6 months of being labeled difficult had led to the most rewarding and impactful work of my career. The strategic focus on sustainable professional development had generated benefits that extended far beyond my individual circumstances. The lesson was applicable to any workplace where employees were asked to sacrifice their well-being for short-term organizational convenience. The center's continued success demonstrated that strategic career planning could benefit not only individual faculty members, but also the broader academic community. The conversation about workload equity and professional development continued to evolve in positive directions, with implications that extended well beyond our immediate institutional context. Henderson's evolution as an administrator provided a model for how individuals and institutions could learn from their mistakes and develop more effective approaches to achieving their objectives. His initial reaction to my refusal to work unpaid overtime had been predictable but ultimately counterproductive. His subsequent recognition of the need for change had benefited everyone involved. The broader implications of my experience continued to resonate throughout the university and beyond. The principles of strategic career planning, appropriate professional boundaries, and sustainable workload management were not only compatible with institutional success, but actually enhanced it. The evidence base for these approaches continued to grow. Henderson's face during the announcement of my appointment had been priceless because it captured his realization that his understanding of faculty motivation and career development had been fundamentally flawed. The moment represented not just personal vindication, but also validation of principles that could benefit anyone facing similar challenges in their professional lives. The experience taught me that sometimes being difficult about the right things, with the right people, at the right time, was not just acceptable, but essential for both individual and institutional success. The challenge was developing the wisdom to recognize those moments and the courage to act on that recognition. 6 months of refusing unpaid overtime had indeed made me difficult. It had also made me strategic, focused, and ultimately successful. The label had been intended as criticism, but had actually identified a crucial professional skill. Henderson's face during the announcement of my appointment had been priceless because it reflected his recognition that difficulty, properly applied, could be an asset rather than a liability. The center's continued impact demonstrated that this lesson extended well beyond our specific situation to broader questions about workplace culture, professional development, and institutional effectiveness. The conversation about these issues continued to evolve in positive directions, with implications that reach far beyond our immediate context. The experience reinforced my conviction that professional success required not only technical competence, but also the strategic wisdom to recognize and pursue opportunities that offer genuine advancement potential. Learning to decline inappropriate requests while remaining open to appropriate challenges had been essential to my development as both a researcher and an administrator. Henderson's evolution as an administrator provided hope that individuals and institutions could learn from their mistakes and develop more effective approaches to achieving their objectives. The principles of strategic career planning, appropriate professional boundaries, and sustainable workload management were not only compatible with success, but actually enhanced it. The broader lesson was that professional boundaries were not selfish or uncommitted, but rather essential components of sustainable success. The challenge was learning to distinguish between productive opportunities and exploitative demands, developing the courage to decline inappropriate requests while remaining open to genuine advancement possibilities. My experience as center director continued to validate these principles. The work was challenging and rewarding, compensated fairly, and offered genuine opportunities for professional growth. The contrast with my previous experience of declining unpaid service obligations was stark and instructive. Henderson's face during the announcement of my appointment had been priceless because it reflected his dawning recognition that his approach to faculty management had been both unfair and ultimately self-defeating. The moment represented personal vindication but also validation of principles with much broader application. The experience taught me that sometimes being difficult was not just acceptable, but essential for both individual and institutional success. The key was developing the wisdom to recognize when difficulty was productive and the courage to act on that recognition. 6 months of refusing unpaid overtime had led to the most significant advancement of my career, demonstrating that strategic professional boundaries could benefit everyone involved.